April 4th, I believe, at 6:30 p.m. And we have a lovely agenda tonight to talk about a just amazing subject.
It's exciting.
Should be very exciting. I'm trying to build it up for you.
Thank you.
Take it away, Ryan.
All right, so I'm coming back. I think it was about a month ago. We talked about this initially, and I know that the procurement code updates are riveting for everyone. I have provided each of you with a draft of where we went with that. And I have put a couple of tabs there that I just wanted to talk through and get some policy direction from you all. And I sent in the email that I sent out to you, I told you that I did this with sort of three goals in mind. The first was to increase fiscal accountability and responsibility to our citizens. Second, to implement systems to prevent and mitigate mistakes. And then three, use staff time and resources in a way that most benefits our city. So just a quick recap, and we will recapitulate everything we talked about a month ago, but our code hasn't been updated in this area since 2005. And so the direction we got the last time we met is that it was time to update it. So what I did was I took the League of Oregon Cities. I sat down with our stakeholders, some senior staff, and then had input from the rest of our senior leadership team. And we made some edits and changes to these. And so this is by no means a final product. This is what staff is presenting to you for your recommendations, for your thoughts, for your feedback. So with that being said, I want to get into the first tab there is on page 9. And in 2018, as you'll recall, you authorized the city manager to spend up to $100,000 without council approval. In today's dollars, that's about 120, give or take, with inflation. I've recommended 150,000, and the reason I've recommended that is to align it with state really contracting law. And the contracting law doesn't say that the city council will give city manager $150,000. What it does, as we talked about last time, is it has really three classes of procurements. You have your small contracts, which are under 10,000. You have your intermediate contracts, which are 10 to 150, and then your large contracts, which are over 150. And so the reason I said 150 is because it just makes sense to keep it uniform, in my view. And so I wanted to give that to you for your consideration. The other thing that I added in there was that any expenditure obviously needs to be budgeted. And then I also added another phrase that said it needed to align with council goals. So I wanted to have some safeguards there for that. So if any of you have any input on that, I would love to hear it.
That one seems reasonable.
Okay.
It does. My only question, and I'll defer to the lawyer on this, aligns with Sherwood City Council goals. Does that just mean I can make a legitimate argument that it should be coming out of this budget because it goes to the goal of the council that is stated or published or whatever?
I mean, I think you could make that argument. Really what I was getting at with that amendment is, you guys give us a list of goals, and if we're spending money at all, it needs to align with the goals that you guys gave us.
Right, but there's no formal so when I justify product business expenses, I put together a business case and say, hey, this is going to, these are my assumptions and this is what I'm hoping that it accomplishes. And I have that as a documented piece of the project, right? This is more of, if there is a problem, we come back and say, what goal was this aligning to? There's not a formal, okay, that's what I was mostly thinking.
Anyone city manager would get super creative, could probably shoehorn anything into a council goal, but ultimately we have the ability to hold them accountable.
Yeah.
In the end.
Yeah. But I just didn't want there to be overburdensome, like I've got to fill out thing and align it to this particular, like I'm just wanting it to be what it's intended to, which is under this amount, the city manager has discretion. Yeah.
And I would say, just as a sort of the caveat into that, is these are broad policies, or this is the law, right? This is our code. The internal policies will look different, and we're going to have a separate conversation about that. So they're not one and the same. And so this is a start to start formulating that stuff. And this is literally what goes in our code.
Okay. Staff's going to put together procedures that align with policy.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
I mean, I like this. I view this more as just a reminder for some future city manager that we don't know, and some future council, that you can't just go off and do something, it's gotta be in line with the plan. So,
Yeah, I love it.
The other thing that I did not highlight is, actually, I'm trying to remember where it is in here, I apologize. Oh, section F there is we are also authorizing our directorate level folks to spend up to $50,000 without the approval of the city manager. So that's fairly standard. But I wanted to put that out there.
Is
So
that as long as it's in the current budget or?
everything under this section would fall under the first, which is council rules. So the city manager ultimately would retain accountability for what his employees do. Or, in some cases, what her employees would do, and they would report back to you, but this authorizes, yes.
And it does say in the current fiscal year budget.
Yes, sir.
In that.
Okay, I think that addresses my
Yeah.
question. I was just wondering, is this like some particular problem we're having currently where everything has to go through the city manager and it's slowing things down or?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, because right now, the way the code's written, if it's, I think, I'm recalling, if it's $25,000, technically, or $25,000, the city manager needs to interview twice. It's just, it's unnecessarily bureaucratic. And so one of the reasons we're doing this is because staff spends, in my opinion, too much time writing staff reports that don't need to be written, based on an outdated law.
And on that,
Kristen's just ready, she's ready to spend now.
on that same page, number 4, if I'm understanding this correctly, in the absence of the city manager, if he's not available, the public works director could approve something and then it goes in this order.
Yes, that's correct. So basically, like the city manager has the authority to delegate in writing like signature authority. And if that doesn't happen, then the code sets out a specific list of those folks.
And that's for the $150,000 level?
Yes, that's
So like
correct.
he's on vacation somewhere, so he leaves authority to somebody.
Right. And if he doesn't do that, if he forgets or
It
if she
goes in
forgets, then we have a delineation of,
It's staff, did you guys come up with this order?
we did. We talked through it. Yeah, and if there's any input on that, if you think anybody else should be added, feel free to chime
The
in.
only thing I would add is checks and balances. I think this is great, by the way, and I appreciate all the effort. But if it happens to be that the request for funds is in public works, then maybe it would go to the next one on the list, just so there's a check and balance that the same person that's putting the request out there is not the same person signing off.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Good
that.
call. And we strike the mayor, I don't want the mayor.
We can replace them with.
Wait a minute, I apologize, is there somewhere giving the mayor some authority?
Yes.
Yeah, strike that and put it in the second most junior.
He is last on the list.
Give me the page.
It's with the police and the mayor. The police chief and the mayor have to sign together, right?
No,
I see, the way I see it is police chief and mayor.
So if it got to F on the list,
We're in
there's
trouble.
no director who would sign $150,000 check, I'm not signing it.
We're all in trouble. That's the
Yeah,
case.
so.
Sorry, when I read that, I'm not being funny. When I read E and F, I read it as the police chief and the mayor have to
Yeah,
sign it.
that
Is
makes
that
the
what the
agenda.
agenda?
No. it's just
No.
always-
Then I would take and out.
We can take and out, I think.
Oh, I take F out.
Okay.
I think that's.
I was joking, but you're serious.
Yeah,
I don't know why a
I,
non-employee should have authority.
and I'm not gonna sign, if the whole senior staffer's not here, someone's asking to sign a check, I'm not gonna sign it, I'm gonna wait. till
Well,
it's-
when you check. if it was checked.
Or contractors.
Right, and I also, right, but I think to your earlier point, this is not about you, this is about a future mayor that we don't know. And so the question is, do you think a future mayor would sign? Then that would be a problem.
Well, no, I'm saying take it off, because
Okay,
I don't think a mayor.
okay.
No, no.
That implies everyone's out and someone's saying sign this contract.
Yeah, I don't, right,
I
okay.
wouldn't, I would never have wanted to do it if it was in front of me, so.
Take out.
Sounds good, so strike and mayor.
Yep.
And then because I do think that
That's why I was like, no, you don't want that.
yeah, because really it's not like everybody is out, but it could be, it's spring break and it is most convenient for the finance director you know, because something is time sensitive, right? And so it's not like, oh, there's been a tragedy and everybody's,
But we know spring break's coming.
yeah, that's true. Okay. All right.
All right, everybody have what they need on that second.
So,
All right.
Would like being on the next page, allowing to spend 10% more because they're local.
I'm sorry.
The discretionary local preference,
Sure.
that we can spend 10% more if they're local.
You want us to delineate that a little further?
I was wondering how to break up spending more just because, I like to support local.
What's the definition of local in this
it
context?
says Oregon.
Oregon.
So,
See, I don't like that.
well, so that's the tiebreaker rule generally. I mean, that's one of the, so if you have an RFP and they both come out at about the same, there's this tiebreaker that goes into it. You're allowed to give preference to somebody that's in state. So that's kind of the genesis of that idea. That's why I see that in there. We didn't change that. I didn't see a need to. If you are interested in having, you know, some more local spending, I think that's a
It
conversation.
doesn't mean you have to.
Yeah.
It's just saying
You're
you
looking.
can, you can if you need the tiebreaker.
So this is current code, you're saying?
Yeah.
We have this 10% in the current code?
No.
Ella's suggestion.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it if it's an option, but it doesn't have to be.
Okay,
So,
good catch.
I mean, they do use the word may though, right? And so,
Discretionary. is
yeah, discretionary and everything else. So I feel like that's pretty covered.
Well, and he has to do good cause too.
Yeah.
To do so, I think there's precautionary measures.
So the second tab gets into a little bit more, and again, some of this is going to be hashed out a little bit more, I guess maybe delineated a little bit more specifically in policy. But one thing that I did want to put in there is that the office of the city attorney, right, not necessarily me, but it probably will be for the foreseeable future, but we want people to come in, or somebody to come in and train all of our employees once a year on procurement law, best practices, and then our policies. I don't know that that's been something that's been done. I think that's an important step. It's just not only, hey, here's what the law is, but here's the way we do it in Sherwood. So we're not all operating in silos, and so we know what's going on in your department.
Is there a service we can sign up for that? I mean, there's a lot of government-oriented trainings around all kinds of different regulatory
check it.
topics. So just so this, you know, if there's like a online course that everyone takes once a year, right? So you're not tied up having to run a classroom. You know?
Would that be specific to our code?
No, there would not be an
Right.
online service specific to our code. There is, I'm sure, online services specific to procurement law in Oregon that
That's
the
what I was
DAS would
thinking
do.
Yeah.
And maybe that, you know, lessens the timeline that we would talk about our own policies, but I think from a city management perspective, he's probably, or she, whoever it may be, would want the city attorney to come talk to the employees at least once a year. About, hey, these are best practices.
Someone's gone, you can videotape.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. All right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the first part of the section, and then procurement management. So I'll just read that. The city and each department thereof shall maintain a list of its active contracts and shall include within such list the amount of the contract and the date of expiration thereof. Does anyone have any questions about that first sentence? Okay.
How, where are these lists? Is it posted on their wall? Is it a?
So we haven't hashed that out yet. My
That'll be the policy.
correct,
stuff?
yes,
Okay.
sir. I think what we would probably at a minimum do is an Excel spreadsheet. But I mean, we would look at software and, you know, as we grow, figure out better options to do that.
Okay,
It just, my sense and thought in putting that in there was we put some responsibility on our directors, who we already trust as it is to manage their own departments.
yeah, so the only other, date of expiration, I see. Okay, yeah, because I found in my own house, the things that kill me are those reoccurring ones that have no expiration date, right?
Right, yeah.
So, so you want to,
Yeah.
you know, those are the ones that I'm worried about, right? A department head leaves and you've got this recurring consulting fee that's going on for 10,000 a year or something, you know what I mean?
Which we
This
really
sounds like
shouldn't have.
something we've mentioned for the past 6 years.
Yeah, to that end, and kind of to add on to what Taylor's saying, I would like to see that each department maintains their list, but there's a master list that's available for everyone. One, because they might be based on previous conversation. Well, for duplicates, we're paying for stuff we don't use anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Those types of things. And then on top of that, if Craig is gonna sign something on behalf of someone else, having that master list so they can go and see what the payment terms are, you know, all those types of things I think is really important.
So it could be one spreadsheet document that has tabs for each department. And it's in one document, and everybody can has access.
Yeah, I think so. I think we would want to work with David to kind of obviously flesh out the details. What I'm trying to set is more broad policy to
Right,
say,
exactly.
this is what we want. This is the direction that we want to go.
I like that.
So yeah, and then the second sentence there, I think there probably gonna be some questions on it, but payment to any contractor in an amount equal to or exceeding 15% above the previously agreed upon contract amount shall require the approval of the city manager and the city attorney. So I look at that as like a checks and balances. So if somebody, you know, for instance, if our PO system or something like that fails and somebody just goes to pay a bill, I want them looking at that list and I want them knowing what the contract amount is. And I want somebody asking a question as to why they're paying over that limit. And if they are, maybe there's a valid reason for it. And, you know, if it's the reason I want Keith and I, or the city manager and I to look at it is because we need to know, do we need to take this back to council? Does it fit within that threshold? And if we don't need to take it back to council, what is the reason that we're spending the money that we're spending?
Do you talk about the 150,000? Or,
If it would exceed, I think what the state says is it's 25%, I think you have to go back.
So my,
Of whatever the contract was, not
so
100%.
I'm struggling with 15%, because let's say it's a $22 million contract for the new bridge, 15% is close to $3 million. That's a come back to council thing.
Sure.
Right? So maybe it's 15% or 150,000, whatever is less, just so we have safeguards.
Well, I was trying to understand why we would go over.
Recurring contract.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, so Brad, and I don't know what the current going rate is, but like for software maintenance, you know, they sometimes just have built-in things into the contract where they say, hey, it's gonna go up 5 or 10%. I don't know what the current,
But that would be in the contract.
no, I know, but I think, isn't that what he's saying though, is that if,
See, I read it as 15% above and beyond the contract. If the
I
contract,
think this as a renewal, like if a renewal comes in and it's under 15%, the new rate is under 50%, whatever, but if it's not.
but that would be within the terms of the contract. So I struggle with the 15% above the contract. The contract would state the renewal terms.
Yeah.
right, but is a renewal automatic though? Like, let's say they come back and they say, hey, to renew this year, it's 25%. Aren't we saying?
So, okay, so there's a couple of things here, so let's break it all out. There's the issue of paying for something above contracted value. There's an issue of renewal terms, so just
Okay.
table that for a second. What I'm saying is, if it's an automatic renewal, or it says in there every year your SaaS fees are gonna go up, you know, 5%, whatever that term is, to me, that's all in the contract. That's not
Okay.
the 15%. The way I read this is the 15% is outside the contract terms. Right? So, you know, so I'm struggling with why that's even there, right?
So
Yeah.
I talked to
Okay.
Brian about this today because I was confused. And I'm thinking of a contract like, we just contracted with the Festival Plaza, right? And whatever that was, I don't remember, but let's say it was $100. And then in the staff report or in our resolution, we authorize the contract plus a contingency, right? So are we saying that they can authorize 15% over the contingency we already put in there?
Yes, I think that's how that language would read. I think based on what the mayor has said, I would want to readjust that because let me tell you what my intent was in drafting this. Is my intent was that for this to apply to contracts below the $150,000 threshold. So
Okay.
what I want to be able to
Okay.
happen, like let's take me, for example, like with a lawyer. If I hire a lawyer to do some work for the city and then I find out, you know, and say, okay, we'll pay you up to $25,000 to do this. Then I find out that there are other issues that are going on, and I say, I need you to tag this into it because it'd be really inconvenient for the city to go pay another lawyer to get up to speed on this. I want the ability to be able to tell him, go forth and conquer without,
Okay,
you know.
that would be better if you're talking about the city manager or director level authority, the 150 or 50,000.
So let me flesh that out a little bit
So
more.
15% or your authority level, whichever is less.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
So that's what I have. I think, and I'll just,
Did we not take this, did you start with a code you borrowed from somebody else?
yes, for the LLC code. This is the model code for the LLC with my changes.
Yes, that work session.
Hey, out of curiosity, the directors in the room, do these changes that we're just talking about, does that sound like it would work for what you're looking to do to make your jobs easier? Okay,
I think it will work really well. It will make it easier. The only one, and we talked about this a little bit, that I'm still, and we're all still trying to flesh out, is the 15%. I also don't want to see it on a contract necessarily for $1,000 or $2,000 and have an issue going, oh, for whatever reason, we had to pay 15% more if it's justified and not be able to make
Yeah,
that
if-
choice when it's within the spending authority.
yeah, it's
So I just don't
justified,
want
it's
to lock it down
budgeted, it's
so
within the
much.
authority,
There's no
yeah.
flexibility
If it comes in
on
at
both ends.
$1,200, you're gonna come back for approval, like,
Yeah.
so $50.
But you still have the authority to go up to
Right,
50,000.
exactly. So I think within that, we just need
Yeah,
to make sure it's
15%
clear that
Up to you.
you already have the
I love it.
authority, not just based on the contract.
Plus your authority within the budget.
Yeah.
Everything you saw.
So the only other changes that I think would be relevant to discuss to the extent we even need to, and I think I got some guidance on this last time, was the prior LOC codes. This was from 2017. And so what I did was I took all of the limits and I bumped them up to the statutory limit to match. So $1,000 to $10,000, obviously I brought that from the $7,500 I talked about for small goods and services. And I said $10,000. When I talked about $125,000 for intermediate procurement, I bumped that up to the new limit of $150,000. And then I didn't touch the large contracts because that hasn't changed. So I made those additional changes, and that's really about
I think that makes a ton of sense.
About the extent.
So can I ask, I got a question.
Yes, sir.
One. Paragraph or section B, paragraph 2. Anytime I hear model rules coming from the state, I get red flags start going up. So could you explain that? 'Cause I'm worried about referencing
Yes,
state
sir.
rules. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different or ways that local procurement works. So we think of like the overarching is the statutes, right? ORS 279 A, B, and C. And then under that, if cities don't adopt their own procurement code, the Attorney General's rules for public contracting automatically apply. If you don't want those rules to apply, you can implement your own code and you can say, okay, anything that we have in our code, we don't care what the Attorney General's rules say. If there's a conflict, our rules win in that conflict. Your rules don't win over state statute, but your rules can win over the Attorney General's model rules. And then if there is a gap, which I don't know that there is, but if there is a gap, then anything that's not covered by our procurement code would be covered by the Attorney General's model rules. I can give you one example of that, and that's a construction manager general contractor agreement. You can't prescribe local contracting rules for that. Those specific types of specialized contracts can only be governed by the model rules, the organ administrative rules that are promulgated by the Attorney General. Is that clear to you?
What about no, that's perfectly clear. What about the case where next year they come up with some new model rule paradigm that we haven't thought of for its owners on the city?
There's a law that requires cities every year to review the model rules for the Attorney General and make sure there's no conflicts, and if there is a conflict, adjust accordingly.
Or add stuff to
Correct.
prevent having to use those rules?
Yes, sir.
I have a question. Back to that 15%, but on the next page, is that conflicting with section B, intermediate procurement, item 4, where it's saying amendments? Intermediate procurement contracts may be amended if cumulative amendments do not increase the total contract price by more than 25%.
No, I don't think that it is, but I think we need to adjust the language on it.
Okay.
My intent was for it not to conflict. My intent was for it to be a fail-safe for intermediate stuff, where if you're allowed to go over that, but if you're going to go over that, the city manager and the city attorney need to know about it before it happens. So you can go up to 25%, but if you're going above that 15, my intent was there needs to be a second pair of eyes on it, a third pair of eyes on it.
Gotcha.
That's what I was trying to get.
Okay, all right. Sounds like, yes, I'm wording.
So any other questions or suggestions for Ryan? Ryan, any questions for us? Do you feel like you got good direction?
No, I think what I'll try and do, I guess, yes, maybe one, I don't know that we need to come back for another work session on this. I think I have enough marching orders to have a draft ordinance ready for you all.
Finalize it, and then if you could work with K2 and just share it with everybody and make sure everyone has a chance to comment, please. I would agree with that if everybody else.
Yeah, I do, and I just also want to say that I appreciate the fact that when you interviewed for the position, this is the thing you talked about and wanting to tackle. And here you are tackling it, so go ahead and follow through. Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right. I will go ahead and close out this work session at 6:01 p.m.